Oh, Shanti. Hey, good morning. Good morning. Yay. I keep saying to myself, I lost a day somewhere this week. I think it was Thursday that I spent down at that data days. I think I just totally lost it. And so then this morning when I got up, I was like, I kept saying to myself, it's Saturday, it's Saturday, it's Saturday. Oh my God, it's Saturday, it's Saturday. So happy Saturday. Happy Saturday to you. And I am thrilled to be here and today, I keep forgetting certain things and whatever that is about. It is not early onset dementia or anything of the sort. It is just that I keep forgetting stuff. And it's not even big stuff. It's like it's today. Dr. Brown is coming on with me at 9 a.m. And I apologize for not telling everybody. Sorry, forgot to tell you. Sorry. There we are. So for those of you who watch me and Dr. Brown usually on Thursdays, today will be the day that he is with me on today. It's not necessarily a normal thing, but it works. It works. And so there are a couple of people who watch us. And so I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it because I was remiss in not mentioning it before. And so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it today. Because I really enjoy my talks with Dr. Brown. And so, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, there, I've done that. Trying to multitask, trying to talk and think and type and all of that stuff at the same time. I got a spot. So I hope you guys had a fabulous Friday. I was on yesterday with a guy who, Reverend Michael Mangus. He has been pursuing his ministerial degrees and recognition through the Centers for Spiritual Living, which was all formerly just called the Ernest Holmes Institute. And I have to watch out for dogs as I move my chair. It was formerly the Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind Institute. And now I do believe it's called Centers for Spiritual Living. And so he's been working on that for a long time, and finally received his title of Reverend. And and so he has a show on the New Thought Network. And he invited me to be on yesterday. And I'm gonna tell y'all, I am like, if you watch me, you know that I am like one of those horses that when the bell rings, I'm off and running. And I can run. I can run, I can talk. But there is this people are like, whoa, Bessie, all the time on me. And so I really try to fit into the confines of somebody else's format. And so what makes them comfortable. So when he proposed some topics for me, it was interesting because I was like, let's just have a conversation. Let's just have a conversation. And so he kept yesterday, I think he already had some questions prepared for me. And so he kept kind of circling back on what he probably had written down, which is cool, which is cool. One of the things that I know for me that I have aimed, let me tell you, and y'all know that Saturdays is free flow Saturdays. So whatever comes up comes out. So bless it, bless it, bless it. So when I used to watch television as I would drift off to sleep. And this has been back since college days, in the big back bubble TVs and all that stuff. I would watch, but I don't keep it on all night. But there was a certain thing that I wanted to watch some television right before I fell asleep. It seemed like it settled me. Now I listen to a book because there's such a wonderful thing called the Libby app, and I can listen to any number of books and as I drift off to sleep. And it has a timer, so it cuts itself off. It's like somebody reads to me for 15 minutes and then it cuts itself off so that I'm not disturbed as I sleep. I love that much better. Anyway, but I used to watch late night TV. So for the longest, I would watch programs like Seinfeld. And Seinfeld was, it was really interesting because what that was interesting. Seinfeld was interesting in that it kind of circled back on a theme. Like it wouldn't necessarily present the theme, but by the time you get to the end of the show, you kind of realize what the theme of the show was, and it kind of circles back on it. So I used to love the way the writers played with particular ideas and how those ideas might strike you. Somebody just brought up the other day this Seinfeld episode where Elaine was talking about, is he sponge worthy? Like if you could imagine that the contraceptive known as the sponge went away. I mean, it was as if, okay, we're going to stop making this thing. And so many people really loved it. And so she went out and bought all that was left on the shelf. Say, for instance, you buy the 10 or 20 that's left on the shelf, and now you have them at home in your in your cabinet. And so her question would be, is he sponge worthy? Like, if I only have 20 more opportunities to indulge myself here and use this device, is he sponge worthy? And so many people ask that same question, but based on a different scale, right? And so whatever the episode was, it was one of those things that it caused you to question some things. Now, so I'm going to set Seinfeld aside because I used to love to watch Seinfeld. But then I got to the point where I would watch because I wanted more stimulation. I would, like most of us over the years, we have watched any number of talk shows, whether they're late night talk shows or daytime talk shows. We've watched talk shows. And there was two in particular that I really used to love. Christiane Amanpour, I thought, was always a good interviewer. I used to love watching her talk shows. But Charlie Rose was like the master of interviews for me. And I would watch Charlie Rose in late night, and I would watch him as he did these interviews with any number of people, like, you know, folks that were seeming highbrow and you know, world leaders or something like that. And the depth and breadth of Charlie Rose's knowledge and his ability to converse was always extraordinary to me. I loved watching him because what I saw in him was that he actually listened to the person that he was talking to. And if they swerved left, he swerved left too. And what you see with a lot of interviewers is that they go in with a list of questions. And when a person swerves left, they stay right on with the topic or with the thing that they were talking about, rather than demonstrating, I've heard you. And if you want to go there, I'm going to go there with you. And so it means that the conversation is more of a conversation and a flow. And there's a reflection in there that, yes, I get. Now, it's one thing if, say, for instance, somebody is interviewing you and they don't know, or you don't know what the heck they're talking about or what they just said. The thing to do is not to try to turn the ship, right? To write it back to where you are, but then to be curious about what it is that they're talking about. And so when I think about the way that I like to interview, or the way I like to have conversation, be in conversation with somebody, is more of that reflecting that I hear you, I understand you. I'm curious about what it is that you say or why you went there. And then to have the conversation from that point, not just saying that I have an interview and I need to get this many questions in on you or whatever like that. I know sometimes it appears that way. So when I talked to Dr. Brown, you know, like I'll talk to him at 9 o'clock today. But when I talk to Dr. Brown, it's beautiful. Sometimes it seems as though we've already gotten the topic in, right? Or like we've already, which we don't. Sometimes he'll text me and say, hey, what are we talking about today? And I'll say something very general like epigenetics, or I'll say something general like, you know, I don't know, whatever. I could say sexuality or gender politics or something like that. But it's very general. No list of questions. No, you got to be up on this. You got to be up on that. And then we see where the conversation leads. And rather than trying to lead it someplace, he may have an agenda in his mind, but I don't have one. It's almost like a dance. And if you've ever danced with someone, I will tell you, I have been known to, when I slow dance, I've been known to not be able to follow well all the time. You know, guys have told me, just relax, like let me lead. And that has not always been my strong suit. I must confess. But what I do like to see what it is that comes up in me and then be able to speak to that. So whether it is some topic that is, that is trendy or something that is totally obscure, I like to be able to pivot in the midst of that. And so that was what happened yesterday, was that I think he had a list of questions for me. And every time I went in one direction, he was pulling me back into another. And so it was good. It was good because one of those things is you just kind of just keep starting again. Like, okay, you start running and then it's like, okay, I got to run back over here. Okay. And you just keep it moving. And I think for me, because I'm a talker. I am, as you see, I am a talker. This is the way that I process information. It allows me to even see what's in me. I don't know if you guys have ever done journaling or spontaneous writing. But spontaneous writing is also very curious for me. There are people who might say to you that a good form of dealing with mental issues or whatever it is, to see what you think through writing. There is something powerful about picking up a pen, especially if you grew up writing. There's something very powerful about a pen and a blank page that allows you to invite in up what it is that comes up. This process for me works better through speaking. However, when I write, here's the thing about writing too, and I've told you guys this several times. I have journals. I have like milk crates filled with journals. Um, and I love keeping a journal. I write in one every day now. But ever since my neighbor passed, and the day that she passed, they took her body out of the house. Her sister came over, and her sister goes in there in the closet and she pulls out a journal, crosses her legs, and begins to read it out loud for the family to hear. And I was just really mortified by that. And I started thinking that I would be more conscious about that there will someday be a reader of my journals besides myself. So for me, that journal is almost like a record sometimes. And even though it seems as though we're purging, we're getting the stuff that's in us up and out, it seems like we're purging. But what can happen after that is that somebody might be reading it, and who's to say what it is later that they get from it. And so I find it easier sometimes for me to process here. And even though this is recorded and saved, I am much more conscious about, I may be talking about something or some issue that I have or something that I've gotten upset about, but I'm very conscious about, and this comes from years of doing radio and television and all that stuff. I'm very conscious about the names that I say. And rarely, I may say, oh, I got this girlfriend, or I got this friend, or this guy, or my neighbor, or something like that. But I'm very conscious that, and then it's left to you to assume that you may know the person or not, but I'm very conscious about the names that I share. Whereas in the journal, I am not so much. And so it's really, for me, this is rich, right? This is rich. Good morning, Erica. This for me is rich, right? Because I get to like talk right here and be in real time and see what comes up and see how it feels in my body, and all of those things. And in a journal, it is just me, myself, and I just kind of putting it down. But now if you're trying to work through a problem, shut up. Good morning, Denise. Good morning, dear. Thank you, Erica. If you're trying to work through a problem or something like that, then it is, writing is, there's no substitute, because then you could see it down on paper right in front of you. And when you see it on paper in front of you and start to ask questions about it, about the feelings about it, then it's good. So people will tell you to put your stuff in the pluses and minus columns, the good or bad columns, the this or that columns, all of that stuff. That aside, just being able to put something, like when I do my genograms or when I do different things, even writing out my desires and my wishes, whether it is to complete my book or to make a certain amount of money or to talk to a number of people or to be a blessing to others. It is that kind of feeling that that you want to kind of hone in on and capture and see what the juice is in that. So so pick I don't want to call it pick your poison, but what is it that works for you, right? And good morning, Twyla. It seems like I haven't seen you guys. I'm so, like I said, I felt like I lost a day, maybe two, through this process of me being gone on Thursday. But it's so good to be back in the seat and to be talking and to be even good Saturday morning, Tracy. I'm so happy to see y'all. Yeah, to be talking about all of this stuff. So I tell you, there are so many, like last night when I was talking to Mike on the thing, he was asking me about, I get passionate about stuff. So just as passionate as I am about epigenetics, going through this class where I am learning more about the Bible, I am feeling just as passionate about that too, because what I'm finding is we have been shackled. Good morning, Juan. We have been shackled to ideas that were just not the truth. And so because Tracy had asked me for the name of this book, Healing Love Through the Tao, cultivating female sexual energy, and that TAO is pronounced Tao. And so, this book was so amazing for me. And I gave that information to Tracy and a few other people now that I pulled it off of my shelf again. And it's, like many things, at first it's a dry read, but at the same time, it's talking about cultivating energy and sensing, yours came last night, sensing the energy. And so one of the, I will tell you that it's really powerful to do some of the exercises that they say that are in there. A lot of times we are conscious that we have muscles, but we are not conscious that we are able to do muscle exercises as women. And so if you can imagine that there are all of these awarenesses that we can bring to our body and exercises that we can do, it is, it's so good. So good. And I tell you, it makes a world of difference. So if it is epigenetics that I am talking about, and talking about the residuals from what we've learned, and I talk about that a lot because no matter what, we all come, and there is this idea that we are born as blank slates, which I'm finding out that we are not, that there is all of this cellular memory, this historical, not just trauma, but just things that have been passed down. If we could think about the things that our ancestors have held important, it's almost as if our DNA is imprinted with certain information. And that information may be something as, it seems like a little thought that get them before they get you, right? And you wonder, where does that thought come from? And is that a thought that I want to have or to maintain in my life? Or if the thought is all is love, right? Or if, I'm here to give, or, if you don't get yours, then, you're going to be without. It From a cellular level, depending upon what has happened to your family, those messages may vary from, vastly from person to person, even what you hold up in your mind. I met a guy at the thing on Thursday, and I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, but I met this guy. And when I saw his name, I thought, oh, I've only seen one other person with that name. And I told him the guy's full name. And he was like, he kind of gave me this look of shock. And then he says, well, he died. And I was like, I do know that. And he told me about, that he was related to that man, as a matter of fact, named after him. And so then it becomes this question of, now what in his life, what experiences or what trauma or, what perspectives from his uncle's life might be superimposed over him. So there are, in our family lineage, there could be any number of things that is passed down over and over again, and will continue to be passed down until we on this level decide to do the healing work, so it doesn't have to go any further. So what is yours, right? The question becomes, what is yours? And what do you believe that you deserve? It's amazing to me that I still hear people who are apologizing as if they themselves are not worthy of wanting what is good and best for their lives, right? There are people who are still thinking that their whole life is about service. And don't get me wrong, service is good. But if you are not also like serving yourself, that leads to burnout. If you are not doing what is good and working and always dying on the cross, like you're got to be the martyr for your whole family or for everybody, you don't have to. It's a wonderful thing when we figure out that not only do we deserve to be happy, that's really what God wants us to be too. God wants us to be happy, and the ways in which God gets us to do what it desires is to make a happy feeling around it. So when something feels good or juicy, you're working in whatever it is your purpose is at that time. And so that's why I allow myself to be arrested by ideas. I allow myself to, like, if this epigenetics, to dive deep, right? If it is gender or female sexual energy, if it is pleasure, if it is understanding what has been told to us and that which is true and that which is untrue, and how might all this fit together? How might we be deceived by what it is that we know? You ever ask you, this is just an aside now, don't go all Erica on me, but you ever think to yourself that there might be a reason why women reach their sexual peak late and men theirs early? I mean, do you ever wonder if by nature there is supposed to be some meetup in these peak times? I don't know. I just wonder about the way things are structured, and I want to ask questions about them rather than assuming that that this is right and this is the way it is. I'm really curious about it. I'm curious too about, historically, the changes and why the changes that are made. When I read Yuval Harari's book, there's another name in there. Um, oh gosh, I can't even call the name of it. History of the World, I do believe. But it was fascinating to me because one of the things that he talked about is what I would call social engineering. So if social engineering meant that people used to live very differently, right? In fiefdoms and kingdoms and castles, and these castles didn't have individual bedrooms and stuff like that. They had great rooms where everybody gathered, everybody ate, everybody slept, all of that stuff. And he said that one of the things that they found is that these family structures, like they acted as clans. And the clans, the clashes between clans would happen, and those things were really great. But it also set up for a lot of inbreeding. And so, he started talking about how there became this concerted effort to then try to get chambers, what they call bedroom chambers, so that everybody was not in the same area watching everybody else or saying, let me get a little bit of that, right? He said that they started trying to figure out, and this is like the beginning of social engineering. Okay, so let's take this person over here and this person over there, and then we don't have these clans that are just kind of getting together and everybody doing everybody else. And so they started separating up, and so they broke down the clans further and further down to now where we have this thing called a nuclear family. But it was not the way that it started out. If you can imagine, they didn't have little teepees for all of the individual children. They didn't have teepees for the whole family slept in a teepee, right? It was, and then when you got big enough to leave the nest, then you leave the nest. So I find conversations around ideas like that fascinating. Like, who comes up with the remedy for these things? Who comes up with the ideas of, now we are siloed into houses, and there becomes a certain place or time that we then push people out of the nest. I mean, we see that in nature. We know that it happens over and over again. Sometimes people naturally leave and sometimes they don't. And depending upon culture. So if we looked in different cultures and really got curious about living situations, if we got curious about all of that stuff, I wonder what we would find and the thought in back of it, right? Because I mean, I'm just curious about this. What does it mean if everybody lives in a one room area or sleeps in the same area? Then how is sex normalized? Is nudity normalized? Um, you know, what's the dynamic on that? How does that then present itself? And so I just think that beyond what we have been exposed to, that there are so much all over this world, so to speak, that remains unwritten, unspoken in our particular culture, because we have been so self-absorbed that we never get curious and ask the questions as to why. So as I read and am looking at this Bible and thinking about all the stories that have been presented, It causes me to ask questions. Even this idea of the upper room, the upstairs, like, you know, really, did they have like, what was the structure? What was it made out of? Why do we talk in terms of those years gone by? Why do we still talk in terms of like, okay, we're just gonna walk up the steps, like, like it was. I've read books where people talked about ladders to get up on the top of the rooftop, but I just I remain curious and questioning and trying to understand, um, given the times and the conditions, because we're not that far removed from stuff. My dad would talk about one room houses. Sometimes you talk about shotgun houses, but you talk about, people living in a shack. Um, so Tracy says, I had a friend who grew up like that in one room in another country. And I asked, everyone slept together. Sex was normal between parents. No one paid attention. Okay. And right. But there is a coming of age, right? So sex is normal, right? And everybody may be in the room, hear the sounds and smell the scents, but at a certain age, that is going to activate a young man, right? At a certain age, somebody is going to think, I'd like to share that with another. And then what, right? And so it becomes being curious about what that looks like and how, whether or not sex is demonized, right? Whether it is, that's something. And I think that I love watching people from other countries and their level of body awareness too, is just a beautiful thing. But if we have demonized, if we have put this wedge or this something puritanical, about our physicality, our bodies, if we can't even, it seems as though that would just be one more level of spiritual awareness, this awareness of our bodies and where they connect, and whether or not there was a thing that I heard one time that I think it was meant to be a joke, but it was one of those things that when we talk about unity, when we talk about us all being one in God, they say that the time that the walls break down between ourself and the other are during those moments of a sexual experience. So it seems as though what society has said was bad is in fact not, right? And so I think it's about, like I keep saying, to be curious and to unpack what that means in our own lives, even the judgments that we make about it or the things that we bring to it. I am in love now with this concept of being able to speak into the atmosphere and talk to the ancestors and to my ancestors and to tell them what it is that I'm thinking and where I'm stuck or where I'm struggling, and be able to intuit a conversation based on the thoughts and the fears, the hopes and the dreams, or the ostracism that lives inside of me. And so wonder if we all took an opportunity to have a conversation in the atmosphere, knowing that our ancestors are fully present, right? Fully present where we are. Like, and if you don't think they are, let's call them forth and say, hey, Aunt Betty, let me have a conversation with you about what what I'm experiencing or what I'm thinking. Grandma, can I have this understanding about how you felt when, when you had to now go out and fend for yourself and your child because your husband seemed to be off trying to cultivate some other stuff. I mean, let's talk about, let's open a space or create a, if we're going to create a chamber or a room within us, let's get curious about what's in it, not walk away from it and hide, but let's ask the questions. Because if you're perceiving that you are the only one in the room, what's there to fear, right? What is there to fear? So, based on some of the examples that Mark Wolynn has used in his book, sometimes he was saying that, in the killing fields of Cambodia, people were beat to death or bludgeoned to death. I get that there is an inhumanity towards man. And I wonder if I was there to comfort, if I use my presence today to say, oh my gosh, your fear lives in me and your fear for me lives in me. But and I get that you don't trust people, but I don't want to walk in the world and walk through a world where I'm building walls saying I don't trust people, because I need to be present. I need connection. I need intimacy. And so to speak these words to our ancestors and to say, so can you lift this stress off of me, that this feeling off of me that has me clustered or cloistered away from other people? Can we figure out how for me to walk without necessarily armoring up all the time? In the Wizard of Oz, y'all know I love mythology and I love talking about what we get through the power of story. And you will remember that most people only saw the Wizard of Oz, the movie version. But even if you saw only the movie version and not read the book, the Tin Man was out and he had rested, and he was saying, oh, if I only had a heart, it was hollow on the inside. And so he wanted to have a heart. And so a lot of times we never asked ourselves, well, how was this Tin Man alive? Well, in the original book, it was because, there was this, he was in love with somebody, and I forget exactly how the story goes, but he went to, he was fighting for love and ended up losing his legs. And so he replaced his legs with the 10 legs. And then, he fighting again over some woman. And I'm not sure if this was, who he was fighting or why, but he kept losing body parts until eventually he was replacing his body parts with 10, and eventually he became the Tin Man. And so his heart had been broken so many times, or he had been through so much, that now he's a walking man made of tin. And he was empty and hollow on the inside. And he wanted to find how to get his heart back, or how to have a heart. And what the real issue was is that he loved way too deeply in the first place, or maybe because he, this was the armor that he put on to protect his heart anyway. And the armor may have kept him from realizing that love was what he was. And he acted on that. He showed up and showed out in ways that was all about love. I mean, because, why else go to the land of Oz with Dorothy and Toto and the lion and all of them? Why else go unless you've got a heart? And so when we look at these things, we can ask ourselves questions about, where am I armoring up and why? Am I armoring up because of issues that I'm dealing with, or is this those that have passed on? Is this my grandma stuff? Is it my mama's stuff? Is this my great grandma stuff? Is it somebody else? Whose stuff is this? Right? How many times were my ancestors like that? When I read the census and I'm looking at how they were listed, and you see that somebody is listed as a mulatto in there in my family line, right? What was that like? Was it rape or was it love? Was it certainly wasn't something that was accepted, and it wasn't that it washed away the residuals of that. But what did that look like? Did it look like, the maid or the house Negro that was, what did it look like? Oh, y'all, I gotta mention this because it just came up for me. There was It's a Wonderful Life is a wonderful movie. I love the movie, right? And it speaks on so many levels to so much that I think that about personal, I mean, just about what it is that an individual brings to life. There's so many different storylines that go on in there. But here's the one thing that I found interesting. Like, George Bailey and his family just seemed like average people in an average size house, but yet they had a Black housekeeper, right? And so the housekeeper cooked for them, and they sat around a normal dining room table that probably looks like a lot like the dining room table in your house. I don't know, I'm just saying. But what was striking to me about that is that as George Bailey's brother was graduating, or he was going off to the military, there was this conversation that was a tense conversation that George Bailey and his brother and his parents all had together in that dining room. And I don't know, I don't remember the context at the moment of what it was about, but that's not the point of why I'm telling you about this. There was a point at which George Bailey's brother said to Annie, who was a grown older woman, right? It could have been 50s or 60. She looking like the Aunt Jemima. She's kind of laughing and everything. You could tell she had been around since these boys were boys, right? And he says to her, he says something like, "Oh, Annie." And as she's laughing, like, I was about wondering when y'all was going to tell your parents that you appreciated them or something. I was wondering when one of y'all was going to say you appreciate. And he said, "Oh, Annie." And he turned around and slapped her on the ass. Now, I don't know about y'all. I don't know about y'all. But here you got a young high school boy in this film. And somebody might say, "Oh, Sandra, that was innocent." Right? Okay. Okay. I'm just saying. I find it was startling and interesting to me. So it makes me conscious and aware that the dynamics of things throughout the years could be interestingly different, interestingly changed. And I could go back to, y'all might say I'm a dirty old woman, but I go back to this whole idea of why it is that women's sexual peak is much later than men. And then to see this little boy, a high school student, smack an older woman on the butt on a TV program that we've been loving for 50 years, I just wonder. I'm just saying, don't look, if the shoe don't fit, drop it where it is. Don't put it on, right? But if you are curious, like I'm curious, I just like to breathe into spaces and see what else is there to see. Just okay. So now let me set that aside because I got to get off of here. But I just think that for all of us, we could be more curious. What I'm about to do is basically, no, I'm not getting off of here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pause. I don't think I have to close this window. Yeah, I don't think I do. I'm going to take a pause because Dr. Brown will be popping into the room in just a minute. And he comes in and he's very precise on time. So when my thing in there chimes to say that it is 9 a.m., he will appear. And then I can start the record and continue my conversation. But I'll be talking to Dr. Brown. So I just think that we all have to be conscious and ask questions. I know that there's so many people that for them, curiosity is overrated, right? Like, just being curious about, how sleeping arrangements and castles and clans and this idea of houses and how we're now siloed, and the difference in those things. So when you start to think about all the differences that have basically come up, the changes that have, to be curious about why, I think, is something that I think is something that could serve us all. In Chicago, there used to be these housing projects. Gabani Green, I forget what they were called, but there are these huge. Good Times, I think, was supposedly filmed based on the structure of those housing projects. And they were tall and dense with people. And, they sat in proximity to each other, and we're housed like people. I love to look at some of the data that came out of that. But one of the things that I am aware of is that those things have changed. Hey, good morning, Dr. Brown. Yeah,
good morning.
those things have changed. Good morning. How are you?
I am well. How about yourself?
I am just fabulous. Just fabulous. I will tell you that I have been sitting here doing my Morning Glory show. And I was like, okay, let me just do it all in the same window because I didn't want to have to go off and then come back on. Although I could see where that could be better served or doing something for the sake of the stuff that is posted. But yeah. So I am curious about life. I am so curious all the time. So thank you for coming in on this wonderful Saturday.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Okay, so let me sort of piggyback off of where I was for a second, because as I think about it, I think that this kind of relates to there was a housing projects in Chicago, and I forget what they were called, the tall buildings, the something, was it Gavani Green or something like that?
Ca- Cabrini Green.
Cabrini Green. Thank you for that correction. And I was talking about how so many studies that were done on that particular thing, and they found what happens, from what I understand, in places like that is that proximity to and shared space can have a number of effects. But one of which that was not desired was this ability to organize people, and to mobilize people because of shared interest. And here in Cleveland, when I had befriended at the time Claire Freeman back in the day, and Claire Freeman was the director of HUD or CMHA here at one time, and like many of our Black leaders, they found a way to prosecute her and send her to jail.
Is she the wife of was she the wife of Don Freeman, the political activist?
No, no.
Okay.
I do know his wife, though, I do believe.
Yeah, she passed not that long ago.
Right.
Okay. Oh,
No,
I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about. Claire Freeman, head of CMHA. Correct.
right,
Yes.
right. And they got her hemmed up and ended up sending her to jail. Anyway, I remember her having this conversation one time with me about the redesign of the projects. And she said that what they were trying to do was to make, to separate, so that people would have a forward facing home with something in front of it to take care of, like grass, that would make them more competitive with their neighbors, and less able to see themselves as having this shared identity, but rather a straight facing identity. So it was about shifting perspective from the shared space to an individualized space, and wanting to have this, because it was I guess research showed that if you have space that you're supposed to take care of, or that you are responsible for, there sets up this idea of competition with one versus the other. And so she was talking about all this science as to why they were changing the setup of housing projects. And there was so much that happened in Cabrini Green. Based on the research, those places needed to be abandoned, because if you can imagine the density of those spaces, and for them to vote as a block, they were a force to be reckoned with too. So not just based on this idea of on one level, you may use it to say there's a lot of crime and things like that happen in this particular area. But there's also other things that people choose not to recognize that happen in those areas. So yesterday, not yesterday, but Thursday, when I went down, I went to a thing called Data Days. And they were talking about how much data is collected on people on a regular basis. And this data allows people to use what they learn for social engineering, which brought me back to the conversation or the clip that you sent me about surveillance capitalism. So for people who have never heard of surveillance capitalism, can you explain that a little bit?
Surveillance capitalism is a concept I came across a couple of years ago. A professor of, I don't know if it's psychology or economics, at one of the Ivy League schools. Her name is Shoshana Zuboff. And she wrote a book called Surveillance Capitalism, and she explains that the usual form of capitalism is where human labor is used to produce a product, and certain economies are put in, certain economic structures are put in place so that the profits remain high. So salaries remain low, productivity must remain high, and then the profits are then put back into the company to keep expanding the company and dominate market share. That's the traditional capitalism. Since the advent of social media and social technology, now, rather than human labor being used to produce a product, it is human experience that is being used and sold to capitalists so that you can be targeted. And well, they sell predictions actually of your behavior. So what they're doing is selling predictions of your human experience. So the idea is that you do a Google search. Well, that information that you searched for is kept and stored. Your response to the information, what links you go to from that, are stored. And they start to understand your personality and how you feel and think and do. That gives them a certain prediction about what you may be thinking and doing next. And those algorithms are sold to companies. It got to a point where after a while, because the predictive value was so good, and they were able to actually come up with personality types, that now they could sell that information to somebody who could target a demographic. And once they understood how they could predict your behavior, they started to understand how they could manipulate your behavior. So for instance, in your social media, whether you're on Facebook or Messenger or Instagram or WhatsApp, all of these things feed data to Facebook. Google does the same thing, such that you do a search for something, and all of a sudden now you will see a post about something similar, and then based upon how you react to that post, you may get an ad for something. Well, now what they're doing is based upon your predictive value, they can send you something to actually manipulate your behavior in the real world. This came through in a scandal that was revealed about 4 or 5 years ago. It was called Cambridge Analytica. The founder is a guy by the name of Mercer, who was a big funder for Donald Trump's campaign. They actually, Cambridge Analytica Analytica had gotten so much data on personality types in America and Great Britain that they were actually able to send posts that could influence the direction that Brexit took in the United Kingdom, but also from a whistleblower, a guy by the name of Wiley, he was able to prove how people in American presidential election between Trump and Clinton had been manipulated to vote one way or the other based upon information through posts and things that they got, which pushed them to do something in a certain way in the real world. And so that's where we are now in terms of our experience online is being collected, it's being stored, and it's being sold because they can predict. I'm sure, anybody listening has had the idea of, maybe sitting around chatting and talking and then deciding, oh, I want to look this up. And you type in just one letter and all of a sudden, oh, it was able to predict what you were going to type because your phone had been listening and had been watching you, tracking your keystrokes, tracking your posts, tracking what you like, tracking your emojis that you use to predict your mood and behavior patterns. And so not only is it being sold to make money off of it, it's also being sold to governments to manipulate your behavior.
And one of the things, like, this is not just what's happening with online stuff, but yes, it is big online, but it's happening everywhere we go. People are collecting data and information, whether we go into healthcare facilities or we go in any number of places. That data is being stored and cross-referenced in this, based on this World Wide Web. And so people are always mining for information, not just post. But one of the things that I've also found is when they find out or figure out, like you were saying, to this idea of the elections, if they figured out or found out that on election day, or even within the election cycle, once polls are open, so-and-so has voted, and they put a picture of a friend of yours up, and they want you to say that you voted too. They have found that they can change the outcome of elections based on the targeted ads and which one of your friends' pictures you might see in one of those ads that are just coming up to say, hey, Sandra said she voted today. I never push that stuff because my thing is I know the insidious nature of these kind of reward things. Like if I'm looking for a thumbs up, it makes it seem as though I've gone to vote so that I can get a like from somebody. And that's not the reason behind why I vote. But for so many, we're caught up in the image of things, the image or how we appear to others. And so by them saying they voted or voted in a particular way, or that they, whatever it is that they've given their image to, or even just saying I voted, it has an impact in moving people in a particular direction.
Well, just to take a step back, you were referencing not just your online activities, but just think about if you have a GPS navigation system in your car. Mm-hmm. So where you go is always being tracked. I mean, we look at it as, oh, if I don't know exactly the best route to take here, I've got this wonderful system which will help me. Well, that wonderful system also has a other side to it, because it tracks wherever your car goes. Also, facial recognition. So there's cameras everywhere which are taking your picture all the time and saying, here's where you are. And based upon where you're going, they can also decide on what you're going to do next. This has gotten to be such a fine tool that actually I just found out in China, who has this system of oppression for a minority group called the Uyghurs. They are in open refugee camps, and the only thing around are cameras, facial recognition cameras, which can see who's doing what, when, and where, such that if they leave a certain area, guards can be targeted to go to that area. They don't need them standing around because not everybody is going to try to leave because they understand that they're being monitored. But for those who have the cojones to try to leave, there are cameras watching all their faces. Well, think about wherever we go, there's cameras wherever we go. How do you turn on a news show and the criminal was seen in the parking lot at Walmart, and all of a sudden now he was seen at the gas station down the street? Because they're able to pull the information off of all those cameras. Well, wherever you go, you're being photographed and monitored. And so, true to your point, that behavior in the real world is also being monitored, just like your activities online. And to your point about doing certain things to present a certain image to get a certain feedback, I'm not so sure how that has affected people of my generation, your generation, but I certainly understand that for the younger generation, a lot of them have been caught up in my online presence and the number of followers and likes that I get. Not only is it a monetary, not only is it a monetized experience, but it is also validation for who and what I am, or quote unquote, the popular term now is for my brand. And that my self-esteem comes from how many people like this TikTok, how many people are what do they say, making it go viral. How our self-esteem is tied to this online image. And what it goes to is this point that Ms. Zoboff was raising. We have a sovereign right to our internal world, that it is not it should not be a marketable commodity. And until we recognize and understand that we truly have a sovereignty over our thoughts and ideas and our emotions, then this need for external confirmation of who and what I am and my value is only going to get worse.
Yeah, and there's so much there. At Data Days, they talked about all the ways in which people collect data. So whether we're talking about facial recognition, or we're talking about people who show up in cameras and in spaces, things like that, that what you said earlier was the predictive quality of these things. So if you type in the search remedies for a headache, or if you are looking up stuff as it relates to high blood pressure, there is somebody who is collecting the data that says that this person, this in this city, in this age group, in this demographic, what all your demographics information is. And now you're looking for this. Now it's insurance companies might be interested, or medical professionals. And so so if we are looking at this and there is all this information, there's a website too that I had thought to pull up, that tracks all the demographic information about health and where you live and the information that you are going through. I'll make sure I send that to you, that link to you. But there is all of this information that people are collecting on an ongoing basis. And the reward aspect of that, the likes or the viral stuff, keeps us, keeps people coming back and then doing more and more things, like the one chip challenge. If you see other people breaking into a sweat and having conniption fits because something is so hot, and then you decide, okay, hold the camera on me while I go through this. I mean, you have this over and over again. And the question becomes, who benefits from all of this? I mean, there has to be something else. So when we think about, we come on to these things, we log into them, what is it that happens with this data? What do they do with the things that we share? And I think in Europe there is a a law that was just passed, called the right to be forgotten.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, I think it is that they can only store your data for so long. Mm-hmm. That people have a right to their own personal data, and you can only store it for so long or use it for the particular purpose for which someone said or someone has claimed. So
but
literally,
here's the conundrum, though. But here's the conundrum. So what the professor brings out is that in order to just live your regular life, you're using these apps. How many times do you actually read the agreement, that long scroll of tiny words that you have to click agree to before you can go ahead and use that platform? So nobody is actually forcing people to do these. We are voluntarily giving up our sovereignty. So when we press agree, so we can go ahead and get on with what it is that we have to do, we are agreeing to give up certain rights of privacy. Now, I can't say for certain, but just for the sake of argument, one of the biggest non-secrets that is a secret in America is with the passage of the Patriot Act after 9/11 and the huge increase in the surveillance ability of the National Security Agency, mm-hmm. who has, I don't know, like a whole city full of computers in Colorado. It used to be they needed to analyze data from telephones and certain other things that they surveilled and listened to keywords. But now they don't have to anymore because, as we both have pointed out, how much we are monitored. So the professor raises this point: how does this actually relate to democracy? Because if you can be predicted, and human behavior can be predicted, then it can be manipulated in the ways we're talking about, then it can be controlled. Mm-hmm. And isn't that the ultimate goal of the elite at this time on the planet Earth? There's 7 billion people. It's like, let's go back historically to the Roman Empire. The warrior armies had gotten very good at conquering all these lands. And so their domain had these far extensions, but even when they took over armies of other country and they paid mercenaries, they still did not have enough man and women power to physically control everyone. So they had to come up with an ideology. And that's when the Council of Nicaea came up with the dogmatic version of Christianity. And Christianity became the ideology of the Roman Empire because they could not physically control everybody. So they had to exert a emotional, mental control over people, and a common shared religion is what came out of that. So let's go now. So they can't physically control everyone, but how can you control people? Well, if I can predict what they're going to do, if I do this, here's the response I can get. So I'm already playing chess. I know what moves I'm going to make. I know what the probability of the moves they're going to make. So already I have in place. She also points out the inequality of data. These companies and governments know so much about us, and we know so very little about them. So there's this asymmetry of information. So we can't do much to predict their behavior. And unless we're organized enough, we don't know how to use the levers of power to control that. But they know all this about us. And I say ultimately because it's the need to control 7 billion people. Because if 5 billion people, 3 billion, 2 billion people decided, I'm no longer going to be a cog in the machine. At a certain point every day, we're going to sit down and meditate, and we're going to send the energy of peace and ascendancy to this planet. They can't control that. There's no way to control what can happen if we understood who and what we are, our true value, and what we're capable of. But instead, we're fed the idea we're a human being, and you're limited by your likes and dislikes. You're ruled by what you are drawn to and what you're repelled by, and they can always manipulate those things, keeping you under control of the lower 3 chakras as opposed to the upper ones.
Yeah, and so that is such an amazing point. And what it sounds like to me is the moment that Toto goes over and draws the curtain back on the wizard and shows everybody what has been happening all along, that they've been manipulated by an idea that is just because it was shared, projected out there, and nobody ever questioned it until this little dog comes out and pulls the curtain and says, hey, look at who's behind all of this. Now,
and it was an impotent old man behind it, right? It was somebody that really had no true power other than the image it was able to project into the world and have everybody agree, yes, you are all powerful, all wise, and all knowing.
Yes, yes, yes. And so when I think about it from that standpoint, it's a lot of people. I love the Wizard of Oz, right? A lot of people are out in the poppy field, and they are so high and so they're sleepwalking and don't really desire to see or to know what's going on. But it seems as though if we are all about the business of seeing, and this is one of the things that the movies are do for us all the time, is that they are really about this idea of how Well, wait a minute. So is it a superhero that is coming to rescue us? Or is it that all of these people are out here trying to take over the world um, through things that many of us are oblivious about because we're still asleep to this? And I
Well, I don't
guess
think they're trying. Go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
Go ahead.
I guess the question is do people really think that this matters, that their pushback on this will change their life one way or another? Maybe for so
Um,
many that maybe many people don't believe that it matters. But at the
but
end of the
but
day,
but enough people. I'm not going to use the word believe.
mhm,
Enough people know that it matters. So the amount of non-believers, yes, it's important. But if those that know continue unceasingly, and for most of us, we have an understanding of this is why we are here in the first place, so we can no further stop doing this than we could hold our breath and die. It is as natural to us as breathing. We know this makes a difference. We know what we are here for. We're here to have experiences and interactions that we are going to manipulate to grow ourselves and change ourselves to that which we truly are designed to develop into, and that is sovereign beings, all connected in unison, who have these quote unquote godlike powers to manifest reality and become one with the all.
mhm,
That truly is the purpose of life on this planet.
right,
It
right.
has been it has been hijacked by a few. They do own the planet. Their concern is as we move from one age and an energy construct of Pisces to a different age, an energy construct of Aquarius, that they may not be able to keep that under control. Because what we're seeing is the rise of that feminine power that was taken out of the Holy Trinity. It was God the Father. It was supposed to be God the Mother, because God the Father is consciousness, it's awareness. But God the Mother is energy. It is that which makes things happen. And out of that is a product called the Son. But they changed that construct to God the Father, God the Son, and something called the Holy Spirit, some vague nebulous idea. It's a female, it's feminine energy, it's woman power.
Right.
And so they have taken that, and we are completely unaware of this existence and how we manipulate it and grow it. Their concern is as we move into that age, they will not be able to control our minds, our bodies, and our attention, and they will lose control. Their fear is they will no longer be in control, and the life of luxury that they have will no longer exist. And they're right. And they are right to understand that,
Yeah, yeah. And
because equality is coming.
uh-huh.
And the thing is, so the number of people who don't know this, who believe something different, our job is to keep doing whatever we do, whatever it is that you do to speak the truth, keep speaking it. But you also have to be aware you have to keep living the truth, because just to speak it is not enough. It changes when you come to the crossroads and it says, okay, you're going to be the old usual you, or you're going to be what you aspire to be. And every time you choose what you aspire to be, it changes you a little bit more, a little bit more. But you have to have the guts, the courage, and the energy to stand in the face of that conflict and say, you know what? I'm ready to move forward. And when you start to behave that way, life will show up differently for you. and we're starting to create our own reality. That's what they're concerned about. We're not going to accept, as you had mentioned before, agree to somebody else's version of reality. We're going to create a reality that we are sovereign and control of. And there's enough of us here on the planet Earth doing this work to make this happen.
You know, and that is so, oh, so thank you, because that's so rich. But now here, I wanna ask this question. You know, you're a medical doctor. Right now we have, because I mentioned the poppy fields of the Wizard of Oz, but now we have this thing about marijuana. And there are so many people. I'm not a basher of marijuana or anything like that. But do you think that on some level that is part of the concerted effort
Absolutely.
to make us sleep to this truth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the two sides to this. So I've been for a long time an advocate of legalizing drugs, because in the countries where they've legalized it, the crime surrounding it goes away. And that was my biggest concern, the crime around it. However, the other side is, now, I don't know about you, but I know lots of people who have used all sorts of drugs, but only a small percentage get addicted. And here's my understanding. You have to have a certain amount of emotional discomfort, a certain amount of spiritual discomfort for whatever has happened. And once you come upon your drug of choice, you whatever it was that was paining you pains you less. And because you haven't fixed the pain, because you haven't dealt with the problem and healed yourself, you're going to use a painkiller, an artificial substance that helps you function like an ordinary person. Now, not everybody has that kind of pain which is reduced by drugs, so people don't get addicted, but enough people do where it is truly problematic. Now, for the recreational users, the functional people that I know, I knew people who had jobs and families who were heroin addicts. They shot heroin 4 or 5 times a week and still had I can't vouch for the quality of their family life, but they raised children, they had husbands and wives, and they had jobs. But the problem is, you're right, that level of that external aid that you use to relieve your anxiety, to relieve your system, your symptoms of stress, will prevent you from engaging in life fully, because you have been placated, because you have been domesticated. We have within us the ability to calm and quiet ourselves, because that stress response is a physiological response, but it starts at an intellectual, an emotional, a spiritual level, and then it has a physical response. And so there are ways to deal with it. And so that's where the energy work comes in. The Reiki, the acupuncture, the yoga, the Qigong, the aerobics, all of that physical stuff can help quiet down all of that. But for some people, they find it very easy to take a pill, to smoke something, to snort something, to inject something, to inhale something, because it works fast and it's very effective, except that you never go through the pain. And until you go through the pain, you'll never be a fully healthy vehicle to receive the divine and to transmit the divine, which is your ultimate goal. So you are actually stunting your growth when you use these things. And that's what they find out about teenagers who are using marijuana. So their prefrontal cortex, where the higher levels come in and the ability to reason and discern and intuit, slows down its development if you start using drugs before the age of 30, slows it down. After the age of 30, there's an effect, but at least the brain has fully developed, but you can slow it down. And so we are actually slowing down and stunting our behavior as adults if you never deal with whatever trauma, whatever emotional thing has come through, as we have spoken before, through our lines, whatever DNA mutations have caused us to exhibit certain kinds of behavior. Until you fix that, you're always going to need something to help you to function. Whereas the goal is, I need to become the perfect vehicle for the divine to come through me so that I can express that in the world. I give God an opportunity to live in its creation, and I benefit from the knowledge, the wisdom, and the power of the God that comes through me.
That is so, look, I want to applaud, but I don't want to take away from my time that I got here. That's so good. So so now I am in total agreement. I'm always talking to people about breathing through pain or leaning into the discomfort that we have, because you got to go through it in order to grow through it. I mean, there is no way around it except for through it. So I am in absolute agreement. The prefrontal cortex, the development of that, I'm so glad that you pointed that out, and I'm saying yes to that. But now here's the other thing that I talk to my nephews about this, and I know that they'll probably be like, Auntie, I'm so tired of hearing this, but I'm always talking about sperm integrity because I got nephews. If it was about my nieces, I would be talking to them about eggs and what all of this smoking of marijuana and their experience then says about that which is yet to be. And so if we talk about the dumbing down of society, then we have to look at the means by which we cause people to have poorly developed prefrontal cortex that then have impact on the children that are to come. Are we even, somebody is studying this?
That is so beautiful. You're right. How they can predict, again, the damage to the future beings because of the studies and understanding the effect that these various drugs, and it's not just the mind altering substances, but let's look at the drugs in foods. Let's look at the drugs in products that we put on ourselves, put into ourselves, that also cause these damages to DNA, to ova, spermatozoa, that can be transmitted further down the line. Also, there's enough studies that show how marijuana lowers the testosterone level in males. And one of the things in our community that we have a problem with is strong male leadership. Men who are willing to stand out and help elevate the behavior attitudes of young men who are just starting to feel that surge of testosterone. Those young males between the ages of 15 and 30, how older men, you know, in our community, how we're reticent sometimes to check somebody because of the damage that has been done to our young people and the concern with what their response will be. Well, as testosterone levels are lowered, the desire to stand together as men in a community lessens also, because that's part of what the male hormone does. The male hormone also helps us to establish our flagpole on a piece of real estate in the 3D world and say, this is mine, I'm claiming it, and I'm going to do something with it. It lowers ambition, it lowers courage, it lowers all these things that are required for a healthy community. So, to your point, yes, ma'am, the poisoning of us through the drugs, and then again, we also don't know what's in the quote unquote illegal drugs. So, the poppies are harvested, they're refined, they're made into heroin, but what are they mixing the heroin with on top of that? And we know from the revelation of the information that came out of the Vietnam War, how the CIA was involved in the heroin trade. We're aware of how the government was involved in the cocaine cartels and the use of cocaine starting in California and freebase and crack. Well, what else is the government mixing these things with? We talk about fentanyl, yes, but you know, sometimes the marijuana fields were sprayed with something called paraquat, which was a poison to kill the herb, but if it didn't kill it and you smoked it, it caused lung damage. So we really don't even know what's in these substances that people are taking because we're not sure of the proprietary or the chain of command that all the hands that these drugs go through before they hit the market on the street.
Wow. I mean, and you know, when we talk about this push for organic eating or organic living, and when you think about how much more expensive it can be to have organic stuff, and people just like, I'll take a little pesticide or I'll take a little this. We don't know, period, what is in stuff, organic or not. It is
right.
Or, you know, like I have become a lot more conscious of how my body reacts to certain things. So if I'm paying attention to how it reacts to sugar or how it reacts to dairy or how it reacts to certain things that I eat, I can pay attention to those things and kind of go and figure out what seems to be good for me or bad for me. But when we're talking about our youth, it is, you know, it's kind of like we were back in the day. They used to talk about how they would feed people saltpeter.
Yes, ma'am. Right. That's right. In schools and in prisons to cut down on the sex drive.
And what then does that do? You know, what was it, somebody just told me the other day that, you know, my they said, well, if you want to get your dog to be more docile, you know, get his things cut off, right? And as if, you know, yeah, talk about social engineering. There is always these little things that we're doing, trying to suppress, dumb down, do all of these things. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not like being aware, then we become subject to this. And oh, that's,
well, you know, you raise a strong point on a fundamental approach, and that is attention. And that is being conscious, making conscious choices, being aware. Don't forget the prime symbol in Kemet for the divine was an eye. There's an eye for Heru, the sovereign king, which is what we're trying to become in our lives, and the eye for Oser, which is what we become when everything, thought, feeling, and action are completely in harmony with the divine. It was being able to see, being able to, not being able to hear, being able to see. And so what we pay attention to, and to expand on your point, how careful you are about paying attention to your reaction to what you put in. Let's go that over to our youth. So what about the activities of what they hear and what they see? The programming, the poisonous programming content in their social media, in the entertainment field, in all these avenues that they are essentially ingesting into their brains before they have a strong reasoning capacity to filter it out, before we've put in a very strong core of value system. These are the values of our community. This is the values of our culture. But they see and hear all these other things that kind of make that difficult, because they're not aware that we haven't taught them, and they don't have actually the physiological capability of discernment of paying attention to everything they hear, see, smell, taste, and ingest physically. And consequently, we're getting the kind of product that we have in some of the young people, because plenty of the young people are wonderful. They're on the right track. They are what we need them to be to take over. But there's enough that we have to rescue and save. You know, as W.E.B. Du Bois, he talked about the talented tenth. You know, there's a certain percentage of people we're not going to have to worry about. No matter what's thrown at them, they're going to be fine. But we have to have our concern for those that are vulnerable, which are a large number, and we really don't want to leave the youth behind. So we have work that we have to continue doing.
Right. And so, but my concern too, though, is that in the youth that are the youth that we have now, while there is a lot of hope, they are also the parents of our next generations. And so if I have to keep circling back to take care of your sperm, take care of your eggs,
Yep.
And recognize that everything you do in this life is affecting the next that is to come. I'm gonna keep drumming that into.
And in regards to that, also who you share your eggs and your sperm with.
Yes. I mean, but it is like one of those things. We're putting, people put them out there all the time. You don't know which is, this idea, like when you talked about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or the Father, the Son, and the Mother, right? When we put our seed into that fertile, receptive soil that people call the Holy Spirit, right? Which is the female receptive energy. What it does is it gives back to us that which is put into it. So if what we're giving out is already spoiled, it has no choice but to give us back something that is going to that we got to figure out how to deal with. We talk about crack addicted babies. We talk about babies that are born to addicts all the time. And yes, babies are resilient, but if they got zombies raising them, we still have issues.
And you understand that is a huge issue that we've dealt with for the last, let's say, 35 years. And that is 14 and 15-year-olds becoming mothers and fathers. 14 and 15-year-olds are not capable of raising functional children, but here they've got the responsibility.
Yeah.
And then you have to throw in the grandparents who are now raising their grandchildren, and they have the wisdom, but not necessarily the energy.
Right.
The energy to constantly monitor them, nourish them, nurture them. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Brown. This is so good.
My
This is
pleasure.
so
Always a
good.
pleasure.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Thank you for being here on this Saturday. I thank you for all your wisdom and information and the twists and turns that we took through this. This is good, and I appreciate you.
I thank you for the female energy. That is my counterpart.
All right. Have an amazing day.
And you too.
Okay.
Peace.
Bye-bye. All right. Our people need a forum to discuss all these subjects. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for being here. I appreciate this. This was good, 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 good. Yeah. So just let's be mindful. All right, I'm off of here. This has been a couple of hours for me, so I'm going to get some breakfast. So blessings to y'all. I love and adore you, and I will be here tomorrow at 1 o'clock, on Sundays at 1, and then back on Monday at 8 a.m. All right, take care. Have an amazing, sensational Saturday.